in person yet again. And for those who were on screen briefly, you looked wonderful. I've come to appreciate video as the next best thing to listen in a way that I had not before. So it's nice to briefly see you. So I'm going to now call the meeting to order for the Board of Regents for Higher Education for this date, June 18th, 2020. We have a very full agenda, and unfortunately a very unusual and sad circumstance I need to share with you that may truncate the agenda just a little bit. We received word this morning that President Ojekian's sister Kathy had perished in a accident, automobile accident last night. As you know, family is very, very important to President Ojekian, as it is to all of us. And he's particularly close to his siblings, particularly Kathy. So clearly he could not be here today because of the press of business on various cycles having to do with the governance and operating and business calendar. He felt very strongly we should proceed with the meeting. So we're going to do so, and I know the terrific team will do an excellent job making sure that questions are answered and that we can move forward the way we need to. A little more on the times in a moment or two, but I know that all of you share our concern for President Ojekian and his family and our prayers for his sister. With that difficult preamble, allow me to call the meeting to order and ask the secretary to call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll call the roll. I want to call it out of order because I'm still trying to identify some, actually, let me call it in order. And if I haven't already identified you before the meeting came to order, I may have to ask you to say a few words so that we can do so. This meeting is being recorded in compliance with recent revisions to the FOI open meeting statutes. A link to the audio recording from today's meeting will be available on our website within 24 hours. Please remember to mute your lines. If a member of the board wishes to address the chair, please take yourself off mute and then remember to remute when you finish speaking. During the course of today's meeting, Chairman Fleury will allow for additional time when asking if there are any questions, comments, etc. And finally, remember to identify yourself each time you speak, including when making a motion. Calling the roll. Chairman Fleury?
Here.
And you will have to check to make sure you're unmuted when responding to the roll call. So all regions at this time, feel free to unmute your lines. As we do the roll call, you can respond. Chairman Fleury, I know you're on the call. Merle Harris?
Yes, here.
I think what I will have to do is unmute everybody because it appears. Let's see. All right. Harris?
Here.
Harris, can you please respond?
Merle Harris is here.
Okay, I'm skipping over Merle. I know she was on the line. Merle, if you could unmute your line.
This is Alice. Are you not? Merle said she's here. Are you not hearing her?
She. Okay, Aviva Budd.
Here.
Naomi Cohen. Oh, Felice Gray Kemp.
Here.
Thank you. Holly Howery.
Here.
Jimenez.
I'm here.
Thank you, David. I don't have you. Can you say something else again, please?
Yes, I'm here. It's David Jimenez.
Thank you. Thanks for your patience while we, Joanne Ryan,
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Elise Wright,
I'm here.
thank you. David Blitz,
Yes, I'm here.
thank you. Kalina Sasanker,
I'm here.
thank you. Commissioner Westby, Commissioner Gifford,
Present.
Mr. Lehman. Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum. Thank you.
Did you get my at
I
all?
did, Rich. I apologize. I was having a problem with my speakers. I thought it was the whole, and I have Merle and obviously Matt. Thank you. Would ask everyone to mute their lines now. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to wait for everyone to mute their lines.
I'm going to muting everyone at this point that hasn't muted themselves.
Let me know when you're ready.
We're all set, Mr. Chairman. I am trying to find some of the other noise that's coming through, and I'll be muting those calls.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't think we're done yet.
I don't think we are either. I'm sorry.
Okay, well, good morning, and thank you, Aaron. I'd like to now ask for a motion to adopt the agenda.
This is Elise, so moved.
Rich Valducci, second.
Thank you. It's moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
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 Okay, any opposed or abstaining? Agenda is approved. Thank you. As I mentioned, some of our reports and such will be truncated a little bit today based on the circumstances. But we do have a fulsome agenda with some important matters ahead, so we'll proceed. As always, we offer an opportunity to address the board. There's a protocol for that. The secretary will know whether anybody has, in accordance with that, submitted either their comments or expressed their desire to make comments now. Aaron?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The board did receive one communication yesterday from a gentleman who had concerns regarding online tuition. That communication was shared with the full board. It has been posted on our website under meeting information for today's meeting. That was the only communication received in response to opportunity to address the board.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on to our next item. For myself, in the remarks category, I again want to express on behalf of the board and the community our condolences to President Ojekian and his family on their loss. We will certainly be in touch with him and assure that the appropriate folks know about arrangements. And I'm sure if anyone wishes to express condolences via mail, that would be welcome and easy to do through the office. I think if President Ojekian was here, as he has on a continual basis, he would remark on the times and the importance of our work in the context of these times. And I'm going to ask Alice to make mention of anything in particular he wishes the board to hear about when we turn to the president's remarks item on the agenda. And I won't attempt to substitute for those, but I know heavy on his mind, as it is for all of you, are both the social unrest and issues of racism and inequity that continue to trouble our society in such difficult ways, as well as the coronavirus crisis and the related economic crisis that certainly impacts our students and our institution. You know, as many of you know, I run a education institution myself, and we certainly have always felt that one of the most important parts of our mission is to bring awareness and engagement of science across our society, and that we should inspire and do our society to act in a science-informed manner. And that's a message that, even though our doors have been closed and will reopen Saturday, which we're excited about, we have worked to express that. And I know that our colleges and universities do that in the many ways that we work. Also, we have seen the disparate impacts of COVID among communities, particularly of color, which only compounds the importance that this principle of education, of science awareness, science engagement, and opportunity, and economic opportunity translates across all communities. And no higher education institution on the face of the earth does that more directly than public higher education. And I know that's the mission and cause that drives all of you, and certainly all of us on the board. And while we may do and will continue in some respects to have disagreements about the best ways to do that, we know that now more than ever, this enterprise is an essential pillar of a successful and vital society going forward, and that's our shared devotion. In terms of the, in some ways, related social unrest, I don't think anybody's been much more vocal about that with regard to gender equity, sexual preference, race, you name it, than President Ojekian. And he and his team, I know, will continue to articulate a very proactive and progressive agenda in that regard, which the board is certainly behind in a very big way. And he, I know, intended to underscore our role and our commitment as a higher education institutions and as a system in that regard. With that, I think I'll just mention that President Ojekian, myself, and President Levinson and others are going to be meeting with the Higher Education Commission next week regarding the Students First initiative, and that is a check-in. We're not asking for nor expecting a specific action, but it's an important part of the base touching and process that we have been working through with NECHI. So that's I think that there's already been formal submissions by us and comment by others, which is all an important and appropriate part of a good process that they are thinking about and we continue to think about. And we'll look forward to reporting back on that session next week. I want to note that I believe this is the last full meeting of the board through which we'll have the services of our secretary, Erin Fitzgerald. And Erin, you know how much, or perhaps don't, how much we appreciate you. And we will find an appropriate way at an appropriate time to recognize you in a way appropriate to your service and your importance to us. And we, again, wish you well in your next travels here and thank you for your services. And I know that President Arjakian intends to recognize President DeFilippis for her extraordinary leadership of the institution and really the cause of higher education, with a particular focus on some of the issues that we're also concerned about today. So President DeFilippis, thank you on behalf of the board for your service, and we look forward to a formal recognition of that as well. With that, Alice, if I could ask you to fill in or embellish, amplify on the items I mentioned on behalf of President Arjakian, I'd appreciate it.
Happy to, Mr. Chair. I don't have the agenda in front of me. Are there other items before Mark's report that we should be doing first, or should I continue?
I believe you should continue.
Okay, doing it. As you mentioned, he certainly had hoped to recognize President DeFilippis today, and we will have a couple more opportunities before she departs. So we'll do that. But again, in this forum, wanted to recognize her incredible work since 2008 at Naugatuck Valley, and the important work that has happened on that campus and in that community because of her leadership and tireless advocacy. And I know he'll want to acknowledge her in person as soon as that is possible. He would definitely have called your attention to the trip to NECHI, which will be virtual next Tuesday. And as Chairman Fleury said, we'll have a number of members of our team available to the commission to answer questions about the submission we made on June 5th and our plans for the future. And we're looking forward again to their guidance and thoughtful questions as there always are. So and so that's ahead of us next week. I would spend just a minute talking about reopen for our institutions. There's a tremendous amount of work going on, and I know that he would want to thank the campus leaders and the staff and others on their campuses who have been engaged in planning. We've been planning multiple stages. In addition, the university presidents and community college regional presidents led steering committees so that we could bring the best ideas from our institutions to the table and to talk about both opportunities and challenges that lay ahead. And all of this information is going to be posted, is starting to be posted on our website. And I encourage you to look at the Reopen Connecticut reports and updates that President Arjakian issues as the state lead, but also the steering committee reports, which we hope to have up by the end of the week, so that individuals can look and see all the thoughtful, both again, challenges and opportunities that were identified as part of both campus processes and across campus processes. And President Arjakian is also now doing a weekly COVID-19 update to keep individuals informed as we go through this planning process. There's so much uncertainty. We want to try to, put forward some information when we can to help with that uncertainty. And the other thing I would say about the uncertainty is that, our campuses are doing everything. You should know they're doing everything in their power to figure out how to bring back students and staff and faculty in the safest way possible. We're retrofitting classrooms, determining teaching modalities, figuring out whether athletes can come back to our universities and whether child care centers can be reopened to the communities on our campuses. So they're really doing a tremendous amount of planning, and they're doing it in a very uncertain time and with not enough information or information that is stable. And so he again would have wanted to thank everybody for their work to date. And as you'll hear later in the finance report, the virus is having a profound impact on our budgets, particularly at the universities. And these are very challenging times in which to plan, and the campuses and their leadership have had to make very difficult decisions to address the budget shortfalls. We're going to need to keep the board informed both of our reopening plans, but the ongoing impact of this virus and the economic downturn because of it on our campuses. And we will continue to do that both in those weekly updates and in board meetings. And should you have any questions, we're all available to answer. So I think those would be his highlights, and I'm happy to share what had been his formal comments with Aaron so that they could be included in the minutes.
Thank you, Alice. I think that'd be very helpful, and your overview is also appreciated as well. And the economic situation, as you mentioned, is going to be covered in some depth in the finance report. May I ask now for a motion to approve the May 14th meeting minutes?
This is Holly.
So moved. Earl Harris.
Elite, second.
Great, thank you. All in favor? Aye.
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 Any
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Okay, so the minutes are approved. Thank you. We now move to the consent agenda. We will provide an opportunity for discussion if there is any, but to do so, I have to request a motion to approve and a second for the consent agenda.
But I approve, make the motion.
Holly, second.
Great. I think we had Aviva and Holly first to the line there with a first and a second. Are there any questions or comments concerning the consent agenda? All right, hearing none, we'll call the vote. All in favor? Aye.
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 Are there any opposed or abstaining on the consent agenda? None. So the consent agenda is approved. Thank you all. And thanks for all the work behind that, which I know is ample, both among regents and faculty and staff. Now we have the standing committee reports, and we'll start with academic and student affairs. Regent Harris, over to you with thanks for
Yes.
your extensive time on this.
Can you hear me?
We do. Proceed.
Okay, thank you, because there was a problem earlier on. I would like to call attention to the resolution on page 33 of the agenda. This is a resolution on the Connecticut State Community College course, college career and success, college and career success course, excuse me. I would move that we, that motion.
We have a mover. Could we have a second?
Aviva? Oh, okay.
Okay, I
sit-
would like to make a few comments on this really very important action. The resolution builds on the board's endorsement of guided pathways. The course we would be voting on today, or endorsing today, promotes student success by clarifying possible academic and career pathways and helping students develop a personal plan of study. Based on research on student retention, the resolution makes this a 3-credit required course to be taken within a student's first 9 credits. The course would fulfill one of the general education core competencies. There will be exemptions from the current normalization policy in some programs, not many, but some programs that will require more than the 60 credits. And student exemptions also will be provided under some circumstances where a student really does not need this course because they're transferring in many, many credits, or they're coming back for a second degree, etc. The course will include a component that meets the general education core diversity requirement. Why? Why is this course important? As we have discussed in the past, our community colleges fall behind the national community college graduation rates and the graduation rates in our other New England peer states. This is very clear if you look on page 39 of the agenda. There is a chart, and it shows that how far we do fall behind. In addition, the graduation rates for minoritized students are behind the overall rates. Over the past 5 years, the 3-year graduation rates for Black students have been 7% and 11% for Latino students. So we have a lot of work to do. Research indicates, and some of this research is cited in the staff report, that FYE courses coupled with holistic advisement do impact persistence and graduation rates. So we feel that this is an important step in the direction of having that impact. Why? We see that students stay in college longer after taking an FYE course. They earn more credits and higher grades in subsequent terms. They feel a greater sense of belonging to the institution and connections to their peers. They feel better about the career decision-making process, and they graduate in less time with fewer credits. I'm going to call on Dr. Francine Rosselli Navarra, professor of psychology at Manchester Community College, who is on the phone and has led the course development process. She will discuss this process, what has been done to this point, and also the expected outcomes from this course. Dr. Navarra.
Thank you, Dr. Harris. Good morning, everyone. So Dr. Harris reviewed some of the reasons why we think this course is important. I'm going to tell you a little bit about how it was developed. It was developed by a team of faculty and staff from all 12 of the Connecticut community colleges. The individuals invited to this work group were all involved with first-year experience courses at their home institutions. Dr. Gates charged this team in spring of 2018 to develop a common FYE course for the consolidated community college. The group worked for about 18 months. We had assistance from Dr. Christine Harrington, who is a nationally renowned expert in first-year seminars. And we finalized the course proposal in December of 2019. That proposal includes the course description, the course outcomes, along with some sample assessments for those outcomes. And the course was designed using a process called backwards design, where we start with the end in mind. So we really frame this course around the question, what do we want students to know and be able to do at the end of this course? I will tell you, it was a little bit of a challenging process. All of the people who were involved already had their own FYE courses. And, you know, faculty were, sometimes we're a little bit of an odd bunch. We get very passionate and very territorial about our courses. And the folks who developed this class were really amazing in being able to put aside some of their own personal biases about what they want in the course and develop something together that we think is really a very powerful learning experience for students. Although the course was developed for the future college, it is already starting to be adopted now. The faculty were just so excited about the changes that were made to the course from their existing courses that they are beginning to put it through their own local governance curricular processes. So it's been approved at Manchester, and in some other cases, faculty simply borrowed aspects of the course we developed to embed in their own courses. When the course was designed, we did have the general education outcomes associated with information literacy in mind. At that time, the diversity requirement was not part of the general education core. So if this policy is approved, we want the FYE group to come back together and look at the definition of diversity that's provided in the gen ed proposal, and then hopefully as the Gen Ed moves forward, there'll be some clarification around that diversity requirement, and the FYE group would work on the class to pull those outcomes into the CCS course. I will also add that I think that is really quite doable. The CCS class is a perfect environment to embed those outcomes and to introduce issues surrounding diversity and equity and inclusion. And in fact, what we're seeing across the country is colleges that have established FYE courses are now going back and revising their outcomes to include diversity. There are quite a few examples of that. Dr. Harris, is there anything else you'd want me to speak to?
No, what, we can wait until we have questions.
Okay.
I know that also Dr. DeSantis and Dr. Gates are on the line for questions. So I think we're at the point where if there are questions, we can respond to them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Aaron, we could field some questions now, and I think you're probably in a better spot to tell me whether anybody is raising their digital hand.
If anybody does wish to speak, unmute your line and ask the chair to recognize you as far as I'm speaking to our board members. Thank you.
Hi, this is Kalina.
Hello, Kalina.
Hey. So I have a few questions. I had some questions at the ASA meeting also, but some do remain. So I guess my first question would be, I know that it says in the report that the the advising lead council recommended that this course be mandatory for all students. And it's also mentioned that the group echoed that recommendation, but it's not clear about whether or not the group echoed that recommendation before or after this this course made its rounds to the colleges and was ultimately, so this course showed up before. It was part of the Gen Ed, the first version of the Gen Ed that went to various colleges, and there was a lot of pushback because there was concern about the fact that we were either going to, because of credit normalization, we're either going to need to dilute the academic content of a program because we're already trying to cram everything into 60 credits. And this is a completely different course that already has set outcomes that is not part of that program. So there was a concern about that. And the trade-off is if you increase the number of credits a student takes, what this could be understood to amount to is asking credits to take on the cost of their own advising to the tune of, you know, the price of 3 credits, right? So I think faculty across the system would have said they're okay with this if the courses could be changed, you know, relative to program, or if it wasn't required of every single student or something like that. They were willing to work with it, but the single course mandated of all students, they definitely pushed back very, very strongly against, and it was removed from the Gen Ed for that reason. So was that recommendation from the group then to keep it mandatory against the feedback from the colleges and against the wisdom of the Gen Ed group? Was that before or after that process?
I'm going to call on the members, people who are in the development process in a minute, but to answer that question specifically, because I don't know the answer. But I will say a couple of things have happened to respond to that I think are really important. One, as I just said, there will be exemptions to normalization. There will be exemptions for some students in certain circumstances. And the third thing I think that's really important well, there are 2 things that the research shows that are important to remember. One, having every student take this course within the first 9 credits has been shown to make a difference in retention and graduation rates. That's the reason for requiring it. secondly, we know that when students have a plan of study early on, they're less apt to take the wrong courses. So in the end, they probably will save money. Instead of having an extra course, they may have had 3 extra courses, because we've seen this. Community college students very often graduate with more than the 60 credits because of errors early on in what they're taking. So I think for all those reasons, it's important to have this as a recommendation for all students. But I will call on Dr. Rosselli Navarra to answer the specific question about timing. I have no idea.
Sure, this is Dr. Rosselli. And let me just reiterate what was said, that the policy before you was developed with those concerns in mind. That's why it includes the possibility of exemptions for students. That's why it includes the fact that the course will meet a general education outcome, but does not require that programs use it as a gen ed course, right? The way the policy is written, program coordinators still have flexibility to put this class where it makes most sense for them. If their gen ed core is already full, they can move it over to the program side, and they can apply for an exemption if that's what's required. In terms of the timing, I think it's listed on the policy on the very first page that the FYE group recommended in February 2020 that this course move forward, and then the Holistic Student Support Redesign Group and the Choice Architecture team looked at the course again and I'm sorry, reviewed the recommendations from the other groups in February 2020 and May 2020.
Okay. I think I either misplaced that or it didn't specify that it was the sort of the mandated single course across all programs. That's why I was asking. All right. So what I'm understanding is that because programs can move it out of their gen ed requirements, this is probably why you feel comfortable proposing this, even though it's conflicts with the recommendation of the gen ed group. Is that correct?
I don't think it conflicts with the recommendation. I'm sorry, this is Dr. Rosselli. I don't think it conflicts with the recommendation of the gen ed group. I think it's actually consistent with the recommendation of the gen ed group. The gen ed group was trying to respond to concerns of program coordinators who want the flexibility to put courses where they need them. The gen ed, as it was approved by the board in May, allows this course to fulfill a gen ed requirement in that sort of 7th open category. But again, program coordinators have a choice of what they put in that category. So they can put this course there or they can put something else there. So I think it's actually perfectly consistent with the gen ed work group's recommendations.
Okay, and they can fill their gen ed with completely different courses and then add this on somewhere else. Okay. All right. I have another question about just the fact that even though you worked with FYE folks across all 12 colleges for 18 months, there's really only one statement about the performance of FYE courses in our system included in this entire report, and it's about Asnuntuck. But there are certainly other FYE programs, and I was wondering, like, in comparing how successful they have been, was there any sort of deciding factor between those that worked and those that did not, and like how that influenced this proposal? Because there's a lot of research from outside of our system, but no data from inside. And I know that you did say that we only received information from Asnuntuck, but we were working with people who were doing this across all 12 campuses for about 18 months. So was there any information about sort of the deciding factors about what works for our students?
This is Dr. Rosselli again. So
Yeah.
11 11 of the 12 community colleges currently offer a version of this class. 9 of the 12 require it in at least one of their programs, if not more. In terms of putting together the staff report, we only had access to his Nuntuck data, and that's why it's the only one in there. Being a faculty member at MCC, I've also seen MCC's data, but didn't have it available to put in the staff report. I can tell you that I have not seen personally data from the other campuses, but taking the word of the people who were in the room, you know, the course is required and it appears to be working. I haven't, you know, I haven't seen Three Rivers numbers. I don't know what they look like. I haven't seen Tunxus's numbers. I don't know what they look like, but they continue to require the course. And I know they're doing their own internal assessments of those courses. And since the course continues to be required, I presume data are promising.
Okay. Well, I mean, in conversation, of course, what I'm providing is anecdotal, but I guess all we have is anecdotal other than it's Nuntuck. So I will say that I was kind of struck by, so I know that at several of our colleges, FYE has been quite a struggle, even those at which faculty are really passionate about it, but just can't seem to make it work, right? But then we also have a couple of places. So I know at Middlesex and Southern, they really like theirs. And it seems that when people like theirs, they like it. They're pretty passionate about it. And what I've noticed, like in the difference between the folks who like their FYE and those who feel like it's not working, is that it does seem like there are differences in who supervises it and who's qualified to teach it. So who are you seeing as like potentially qualified to teach a course like this?
Dr. Roselli, can you answer that at this point?
Sorry, I was having difficulty unmuting. So I would say, let me point out first of all that this, you know, what we're proposing as part of this policy, the CCS course, is a new course, and you know, we will need to do new research on this course. But the way it was developed was to look at the evidence and at what is working at our own campuses and what is working nationally in these types of classes. We also, and this is part of the policy as well, would hope that there is, and the policy demands that there is, professional development and oversight of this class so that we're assuring that faculty are trained to teach the class and to meet the outcomes, and we're continuing to assess those outcomes, and that there's continual process of improvement for the class, which we really should have for all our classes, not just an FYE class.
Right. I'll say the reason I'm asking is, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I think this is an ongoing process, and I agree with you. There may be a difference in who teaches the course, and I think this is something that will be discussed. There will be administrative oversight, and I think this is an actual, if people have comments, faculty have comments about, from their experience, what the qualification should be, I think they should direct this to the folks that are working with the FYE course. I mean, I think it's an important thing. We don't have to come up with the parameters now, but we should, but there is an opportunity to contribute to that discussion. So I think that that would be helpful as we move along. So do you have another question? Okay.
I do, and the reason I'm asking this question is because I see a different difficulty that is not specifically about who's going to teach this course. And I will say also, I understand that it is very strange that I'm asking these questions at a board meeting, but I also think that I don't know if this has ever happened before, that a course has come to the board without having gone through any curricular channels, without going through the TAP-like process that we're using for Students First. This is a course with specific outcomes, and there's a real question as to whether it has the capacity to meet these outcomes and whether it is reasonable to believe that somebody who is qualified to achieve one of those outcomes is also qualified to achieve another, right? So this is the reason that I'm asking this, because once this goes through, the board will have instructed the faculty who are developing this course on precisely what the outcomes will be, and they will just have to work within those constraints. I want to make sure that those constraints are feasible, because otherwise we're going to be harming like basically every student, right? This is a mandated course for every student. So I apologize for doing this, but am I correct in saying that courses don't usually come to the board before they are they go through the usual curricular channels and have these sorts of questions asked about them?
I think if you look at, the resolution that on page, on page 34, you will see that we're requiring a free credit course. We're requiring that all students take it. But we are not in this, we are ensuring that it fulfills one of the general competencies. We're not actually moving on the specific outcomes of the course. This is a policy, and we're leaving it up to the committee and faculty to come up with the actual, filling in the blanks of that policy. So no, we are not getting involved in the very specifics of the curriculum. We're not saying we're qualified to do that.
So I'm trying to find it in the resolution, but this does say that this course will meet the diversity requirement, and the diversity requirement has not yet been formulated by any faculty group. And in fact, that was the worry I had last month when I said I worry about passing through a gen ed that asks for a diversity requirement when no such requirement hasn't been specified anywhere. It hasn't been described. We don't know what that means yet. And I thought that it was a little hasty, because what it might do is cause us to continue to approve things before they are fully complete without a full understanding of what the implications of that will be. And that's going to hit our students at some point. So we don't have a diversity requirement specified yet. There's supposed to be a work group, I believe, in the fall of faculty who will figure out what that should look like and what it would be required of such a course, who could teach such a course, what its subject matter should be, etc. And this resolution specifies that this course meets that requirement, which is, I think, incidentally, the only diversity requirement for our students. So I think that's fairly important, especially in a moment like this when we see how important it is to make sure that we are sufficiently exposed to perspectives other than our own.
Kalena, you sort of beat me to the bottom line. I have a short amendment to the resolution because I have been thinking about this after your comments at the ASA meeting, and given what's happening. I will read it now, and then I can read it formally if later if the chair wants me to. What I am going to suggest that is because I do think that we are not, this is not a sufficient coverage of diversity, and I think we can all say that. So I am going to recommend that in the third bullet in the resolution, which talks to the diversity requirement, at the end of that we add, with the acknowledgement that diversity topics should ideally be embedded throughout the general education core and across the curriculum. So we are just saying that diversity is important. This is an introduction to it, and it's up to others to determine whether it fully meets what we need to do in diversity as we move along. And we're acknowledging that, and we believe that it should be in all areas of the curriculum. And as I said, embedded throughout the education core and across the curriculum. So I am going to move that amendment when we finish this discussion. And I think we're about there, I hope.
Does anybody else have a question or a comment on this topic? Anybody else?
I do. It's Dave Blitz.
Yes.
I got disconnected. I don't know if Kalena asked the question with respect to the issue of white middle class norms. But as an external observer of what is going on, it seems clear to me that this course certainly is demanding quite a bit, namely college success, career success. Of course, the two are linked. FYE, general education, holistic advising, guided pathways, and this question of diversity. And I don't see, it was mentioned earlier that there is sample syllabus and outcomes for assessment, but I don't see that included in the report. But there is the research report, which is included in the agenda package. And unless Colina mentioned this while I was disconnected, I'd refer you to page 41 of the agenda packet. And this is in the report from Mr. Ben Wong, the Presidential Fellow associated with the CSCU. And the quote that I'm going to give you is the following: "It is important to note that collegiate expectations of quote unquote proper behavior are rooted in white middle-class norms. Thus, they can be especially difficult to perform for students who did not grow up in that culture or have family members who attended college." That statement can be interpreted or misinterpreted in many different ways, and I'm certainly not going to belabor the point. But when I first saw it, it struck me as, it seemed to me inappropriate, implying that students taking this course, or that the research upon which the course is based, indicated that they need to, in fact, conform to, quote, capital white middle-class norms. I suspect that's probably not what Mr. Wong, who I understand is a graduate student at Yale University, intended. Nonetheless, here it is in the agenda. And it seems to me appropriate to draw attention to that, and it seems to me that it should be clarified if this is going to be included in the agenda as it is formalized as the minutes.
I think, Dr. Gates, can you respond to that?
Yes, thank you. Good morning, Jane Gates. I read the paragraph and believe that obviously it's been misinterpreted. It is an accurate statement in that it's referring to the congruent type relationship between a student who comes from an upper middle income class background versus one who comes from a very dissimilar environment, one who comes from an underserved community. For example, academic incongruity occurs when students are unable to function fully in an academic environment where they have few faculty role models, where the curriculum is Euro-centered, and the perspectives of students are silenced or marginalized. Students of color are particularly affected by cultural and academic incongruity. So this is exactly, research supports this, and it is exactly correct and speaks to why we should have FYE courses to ensure that our students are integrated in an existing culture that is in fact Eurocentric based. So that's all that it's saying. It's simply saying that students who aren't familiar with this construct, privileged students, best fit into the mainstream academic culture, while students who come from underserved communities and very dissimilar worlds don't, unless of course we intervene and provide an opportunity for these students. And that's all that it's saying. Research, there is a lot of research that supports this position. Having been in academia and taught myself for over 25 years, 30 actually in the classroom, I know that there are situations where students, as a result of cultural incongruity, experience in the form of alienation, marginalization, and even cultural stereotyping and discrimination. So this is factual. To argue that it isn't is in itself inaccurate. So it does not in any way speak, it is the reality. It is our reality and what we face and what I faced and many others, and particularly students from underserved communities and students of color. But what I appreciate your point, maybe we could state it differently, but in fact, the information itself is accurate.
This is Colina.
Thank you, Jen.
May I speak to that also? Because that is also my experience. And I thank you, David, for pointing that out. While I don't think anyone would disagree that that for students who are non-white and non-middle class, they are disadvantaged, right? And many of us have actually had that experience. No one is denying that, but this document itself, right, stands as a sort of exemplar of our priorities. And let's even just look at the very first name in the as far as the citation of this concern about non-white, non-middle class students, the Laura Rendon. If you actually look at her research, what she encourages is not as much assimilation as as sort of a celebration of, right, diverse culture. Okay, now what this document actually does is it goes on for about 13 pages describing the need to expose non-white, non-middle class students to those norms and to teach them those norms, right? And certainly, listen, I've been through it. That is absolutely necessary. Those are the tools. But the fact that that is necessary is the injustice, right? That is the racial and class injustice that we hope to solve. So we don't want to replicate it, right? And what we mean by things like structural and class, like racial and class sort of structural injustice, right, is that often we center the demands of the dominant groups while sort of relegating the needs of the others to the margins. This document does that. It talks for 13 minutes. I need to finish this. It talks for 13 minutes, 13 pages, sorry, about the needs, or the ways in which non-white, non-middle class students need to be fixed. And it devotes, I think, almost just maybe one sentence in one paragraph to what is meant by diversity. And I will read that sentence to you. To prepare students for an increasingly diverse and interdependent campus and the world that they live in and will lead. I'm not sure what that means. It's very general, but clearly not enough care has been taken to think about what diversity means and whether it can be incorporated into a course like this. So I think this is a real concern, because you have to think about what you are actually communicating to students when you center one set of demands and do not address the other set. I hope that makes it a bit clearer.
Karina, I'm going to just make two comments, and I do think we need to move on. One is, you're confusing two things. One is, I believe, from my experience in academia, as well as looking at where we are right now, there are academic demands that are very different. In fact, all students have it. I remember when one of my granddaughters first went off to college, she had to control her own life now. No one was telling her every minute what to do. And here she is, a very privileged white student. And so she had those problems. So I think this course is for all students. And the diversity actually element is for all students too, for students that have grown up in different kinds of environments. So I think we're mixing two things up here. We can debate the research. I think that's a good debate to have offline, but I think we need to move on now to the actual resolution itself. And therefore, I would like to formally propose the amendment. I would like to move it that I suggested early on, and that is, again, I'll just read it quickly, and bullet 3 to add at the end, with the acknowledgement that diversity topics should ideally be embedded throughout the general education core and across the curriculum. And I think this somewhat addressed your concern. So I move that, and I think we need a second.
Yes, we need a
Right.
second. We need a second for the amendment.
I second it. Elise Wright.
Thank you, Elise. All right. On the amendment, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
On the amendment, all opposed or abstaining? Okay, the amendment is approved. And the next step would be to vote on the amended resolution, having reflected on the discussion that we've heard, and of course that was had at the committee level. So I need a vote then on the resolution as amended. We have a motion and a second on the resolution itself. Do we need another one, Aaron?
Excuse me. No, Mr. Chairman, by having the vote on the amendment, you are right. You're gonna
All right.
now vote for the resolution as amended, and that was moved by Merle Harris and Aviva Budd.
All right, thank you. Okay, so the resolution has been moved and seconded. It was amended. And now I'll call the vote on the resolution itself. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Are any of the regents voting in opposition? Are any abstaining? Okay, so the resolution is approved. Thank you for the good discussion and the good work behind this, and the recognition that there is more work to do. I believe that concludes the academic and student affairs report. Oh, no, you have an yes, you have an information item. Yes.
I just want, there is an information item. I will go through it very quickly because it's a very important topic, and I think we need to take adequate time, maybe for a complete report at a meeting next fall. If those of us who've been on the board for a while remember that when PA 1240, that was in 2012, was enacted, and it was legislation to revamp the way we did developmental education in our community colleges, actually across the board, but it was focused on the community colleges. And we had a report from Dr. Mike Bukaris, Interim Dean of Student Affairs at Norwalk Community College, who is a co-chair of the Development and Education Advisory Committee with Mike Stefanowitz. And if you recall, this legislation required that, one, we used a different way of deciding who needed developmental education. It couldn't depend on one element. We were just using Accuplacer at the time. And it required that we had 3 levels of developmental education: embedded, intensive, and transitional. And I think the report is included in the agenda, and I ask you to look at it very carefully. It shows that we are making some progress, particularly with the embedded courses, which allow students to take the actual college level course with another embedded component. It could be either in class tutoring or another 1-credit course. There are different ways we're doing this. And we do see increased there are more students taking that first and passing that first level, either math or English course. We see better grades, that they're passing it. So we are seeing some improvement. There is still work to be done, and there are recommendations included in the report. One is adequate resources. Additional resources have given to implement PA 1240, but I hope they're continued, because without that, it's very difficult to provide the courses needed, and especially in the embedded courses, the extra help that's needed. We also do need some more in-depth studies, some more research to see are some approaches are more successful than others, and what are the long-term effects on student success. We had to wait until we had a peer group that actually went at least a few years beyond when they took that course to get data. Now we have that, and we can look at, are they graduating, and how long are they taking to graduate from the community colleges, or are they transferring? All those questions need a lot of additional work. But it was an excellent report. I hope that you'll all get a chance to read it and that in the future we can have this kind of report at a board meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next we turn to the Audit Committee. Regent Wright, I know you have a couple of items for us.
Yeah, well, I just have a report on our last meeting. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Audit Committee met on Tuesday 2nd, and the agenda included an update on the audit of the Connecticut community colleges for fiscal year 2019, and also planning for the fiscal year 2020 audit for the Connecticut community colleges, the Connecticut State Universities, and Charter Oak State College. The discussion included management independent auditors Grant Thornton, who provided us with an overview of financial statements, results, and the audit status. At the time of the committee meeting, the community college audit was substantially complete and statements were subsequently issued on June 10th. However, Grant Thornton identified one item as a significant deficiency, which was failure to close the books in a timely and accurate manner. Grant Thornton recommends the Connecticut community colleges formalize closing processes to ensure institutional knowledge is retained and applied consistently. This finding, however, did not result in a modified opinion on the financial statement. And as we previously discussed, the delay in closing the year and issuing financial statements was primarily driven by the Uniform Chart of Account change, which was implemented effective July 1st, 2018. The chart change required CSCU to make some unforeseen adjustments to closing procedures to ensure the integrity of the financial statements. Staff turnover and IT upgrades occurring near the fiscal year end also contributed to the delay in the completion of the financial statements. The accounting team has worked through the challenges and implemented or modified formalized closing procedures as recommended by the auditors. And management does not anticipate delays in next year's audit. Grant Thornton also discussed planning for the fiscal year 2020 audit and preliminary field work, which is currently underway. Management discussed that Grant Thornton's contract expires after the fiscal year 2020 audit, and CSCU will issue an RFP for fiscal year 2021. Mr. Chairman, that concludes my report.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from members of the board? All right, thank you. Finance and Infrastructure Committee report. Regent Balducci, I know you have a couple of action items for us and a lot on your mind.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Finance Committee met on June 10th. And, you know, we use terms such as the last 3 months, difficult times, and we're all in this together, etc. And I think that really applies to our budget. Trying to create a budget well over $1 billion that works using either hypothetical numbers or non-confirmed numbers is almost impossible. And I'd just like to take just a second to thank Ben and Valentina and the men and women that work with them to come up with and creating a budget that is probably the most unique I have ever had the opportunity to see, and it will remain in flux for the next couple of months. The plan deals with best guess numbers, I suppose you could say. It has to be frustrating to all of them and to the presidents and CFOs, financial people in each of the colleges and universities. We'll be taking a more consolidated look at these numbers in October after the September numbers are more available. And we're also asking campuses to prepare to look for additional contingency plans in case the numbers are worse than what we see right now. I have, and you said that prior, Mr. Chairman, 2 items. The first one's an easy one. It's an information item, and it identifies several instances where the system's approved reducing fees pertaining to online courses. These small fee adjustments are in favor of the students were authorized by a resolution establishing fees for the coming year and reflect the changed circumstances under this coronavirus pandemic. The second item is an action item, much more involved, much more detailed, and scary at times when you look at it. The second item on the agenda approves the spending plans for the universities, the community colleges, and Charter Oak. The spending plans proposed by the institution reflect the challenges and uncertain times we all face, which I mentioned before. In particular, these budgets all made major assumptions about enrollment and operating costs that appear realistic based on what we know today, but we may be proven wrong a few months down the road. As a result, the staff included in the plan the commitment to return to the board in October to review actual enrollment and revenue levels for the fall, to identify specific actions being taken by campuses to achieve spending reduction targets included in the plan, and to propose deeper contingency plans to the extent that the state of our budget and operations demand. And that's the point I mentioned about looking at more rescissions, et cetera, colleges and universities. The spending plan includes funding to pay for CBAC raises of 5.5% for unionized workers. These raises are anticipated to cost a total of $22 million, $12.5 million at the universities and $9 million at the colleges and $250,000 at Charter Oak. The spending plan, as approved by the committee, will require drawdowns of reserves in both universities. We are not well stacked as far as reserves go in either situation, but particularly at the college level. There are going to be $33 million in drawdowns at the university level out of 139 million of our reserves, which will leave about $105 million. The colleges will be drawing down $15 million out of their $32 million of reserves available, which will leave approximately $17 million, which is not good. Charter Oak, by the way, has proposed a balanced budget, which is the bright side here. The university's budgets reflects enrollment declines of about 10% at the three of the universities, at Central, Southern, and Western, and at 2% at Eastern. Additionally, the universities assume lower occupancy in dormitories than normal, somewhere between 71 and 83% of current capacity. The resulting revenue declines are partially offset by spending reductions in a year that includes CBAC's raises of $12 million, fringe benefit growth, and uncertain costs still related to social distancing and public health requirements, which have certainly changed things for everyone. The community college spending plan reflects flat enrollment compared to 2020. While this produces flat tuition, the state gave us some assistance, including fringe benefit support, and is rising by about $30 million in fiscal year 2021, offsetting expenditure growth across the system of $21 million. This expenditure growth would have been considerably higher in a normal year, with the CBAC wages and fringe benefit increases alone accounting for $23 million, plus a budgeted increase of $12 million for COVID-related costs funded with federal funds, which is a good thing. The budget for the colleges also included changes to reflect the establishment of the Connecticut State Community College. This entails reducing the system office budget by $32 million and establishing a new CSCC budget of $35.7 million. We're moving people offline that were being funded out of the system office originally and putting them where they belong, except for a small number of folks. Relocating shares and cost services to the campuses, along with the block grants to support these, will benefit, and the campus budgets are going to increase by about 4%. The community college budget controls spending to this level by requiring a holdback for each of the colleges of about 2%, plus a reduction of 7.5% at the Connecticut State Community College. The plan for accomplishing these reductions will be provided to our board in October. The community college budget also includes $3 million in system reserves to support implementation of PACT, which is the Pledge to Advance Connecticut for our community colleges. And this funding this funding level may require that the campuses reduce minimum grants or otherwise prorate these. And we're hoping that the legislature, who proposed this plan and was supported, would also provide the funding which they were supposed to do, but due to, of course, the shortened session and the non-discussion of budgetary matters, we're going to have to wait on that. And we may end up having to prorate those tuition fees to the eligible students. The program will ensure helping enrollment and hopefully increase enrollment possibly this fall and hopefully in the spring of next year. I looked at this resolution and read it several times. It's rather sad when you look at what it is and what it contains, but it has to be done. We have to put something in place, and we have to move forward as a board trying to save community colleges and universities from the distress that they face. We don't know what the numbers will be. Hopefully they will improve. No one can guarantee that. But with that, Mr. Chairman, I move adoption of the resolution.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Aviva Budd, I second.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation and the detailed materials that were provided in advance. And I know there's been extensive discussion on the Finance Committee with the management team about this. Do members of the board have questions or comments?
Yes, I have a comment. It's Dave Blitz.
Yes, Dr. Blitz, go ahead.
I've looked in particular at the growth of the budget for the system office. And looking at the last year's report, the increase of the system office budget from 2017 to 2020 was an astounding 46.5% increase, from $24.7 million to $26.9 million. That's from last year's Finance Committee report. I wasn't a member of the committee at that time, but I did receive a copy. Looking at this year's report, which is very complicated, and I appreciate both what Rich Balducci and Ben Barnes have done to explain it, and I think their explanations from a factual point of view are quite important and correct. But if we look at the 2019 to 2020 budget for the system office, adding together the salary, fringe, and other expenses, that amounts to $48.56 million. If we look at the 2020 to 2021 budget, including 92% of the community college SO system office budget going into the higher administrative levels of the Connecticut State Community College, the still non-existent one community college, we see that that number has increased to 54.25% million. That's an astounding 11.7% increase. Now, taking into account the holdback of 52 of 80 proposed new hires for a total of 2.9 million, and that's the October review, which I think Rich Balducci mentioned, that is still a 5.7% increase in the budget of the system office, including those three components, the CSU component, the CC component, and the CSCC component. I find that really an astounding number when I contrast it with what is happening, for example, at my home institution, CCSU, where our budget is decreasing by 5.7%. I realize, and it should be made clear, that the reasons for these two things are different. the decrease in budget, as Rich Balducci just mentioned, at the universities is largely due to the expected reduction in enrollment and resident occupancy due to response to the pandemic. But the increase, the budget of the system office and central administration of 11.7% without the holdbacks and 5.7% with the holdbacks is due to students first. And I think the contrast between that continued significant increase in costs of a program which was supposed to reduce costs, in contrast to the differently caused reduction in budget of the universities, it's nonetheless a contrast which is remarkable. And I just wanted to draw attention to it.
Thank you, Dr. Blitz. The board has been highly conscious of the larger promise of mitigating out of control expenses in our system, and has tasked the management team with assuring that at the end of the day, we get to the right place there. And I'd invite perhaps our CFO, Ben Barnes, to respond to the question, because it's a fair question and one that the board has been pressing as well. And I think witness the recommendation is satisfied that at least on balance in the moment, we're still going in the right direction. Is Ben on?
He is, Mr. Chair. He looks like he's unmuted, but we're not hearing him.
Good.
There he
Hello.
is.
I'm sorry.
There he is.
Forgive me for that. I was dually muted, and now I'm no longer muted. Thanks for the opportunity to respond to that. First of all, I think that it appears to me that Professor Blitz has accurately described the numbers. I'm not sure that the context of those numbers is entirely correct. The purpose of the expansions in the system office are, there are several reasons why the system office budget has grown at the level that it has over recent years, and why it is proposed to grow as it has been proposed to grow in the budget that you are considering before you today. First of all, the effort with NETCHI to gain accreditation of the Connecticut State Community College under Students First has generally, our efforts to seek that accreditation have prompted the accrediting body to push the system to develop the capacity of the one college in advance of its accreditation. That there is a requirement, or at least a general push by NETCHI to require that the system develop that capacity prior to flipping the switch and granting accreditation and converting into a single college. So it was inevitable that we would have to build some of the necessary infrastructure, which is required under accreditation, the president's position, the CFO position, the ability to provide academic leadership. These are all requirements of the accreditation standards. And so we have, I think, very judiciously begun to build out the necessary components of a single college at the same time that we continue to support all the existing colleges meeting those same accreditation standards. The other area where we've grown is there are certain activities which we believe are areas where we have not excelled historically within the community colleges, and yet are that are outside of the purview of the accreditation standards generally. Those are enrollment management and advisement. And the one college, the Connecticut State Community College budget proposal that you have includes some significant expansion of our capacity in the area of enrollment management and in advisement. The budget includes, well, the original budget included the bringing on additional staff members for the enrollment management function. Some of that I will acknowledge we have indicated that we are going to hold on while we evaluate our financial resources through the spring semester or through the fall semester. But we are absolutely moving forward with that expansion of capacity in enrollment management. It also includes guided pathways in which we are using this budget to begin the hiring in the area of guided pathways. In particular, there are, well, originally there were 44 positions for guided pathways that we had intended to include in this budget. A number of those we're holding back on until we see what our resources look like after we've gone through the fall enrollment period. However, and I'm just looking up the exact number. We clearly would plan to fill 3 positions for guided pathways this summer, and then there are an additional 15. There are an additional 30 or so, more than 30 positions, close to 40 positions that we would like to hire in order to roll out the full strength guided pathways at 3 campuses as part of our phase-in of that new advisement program. The total costs, just PS, I don't have the fringe number in front of me. Oh no, I do. The total cost of that is approximately $4.5 million in salary and fringe for guided pathways, and a total of about $2.6 million for the enrollment management function. Now, a fair amount of the enrollment management function has been added in recent years. Obviously, the hiring of the Vice President of Enrollment Management, Allison Buckley, I think she started right when I did at the beginning of 2019, was the beginning of that. A few additional staff members have been brought on in the meantime. But these positions, both the advisors and the guided path and the enrollment management positions, will enable us to launch a whole series of efforts to improve our compliance with the various rules around financial aid and use of federal programs. Will allow us to increase our enrollment, we think, significantly, which ultimately is the best way for us to shore up our finances, and will allow us to meet the achievement and student success measures that we have identified as one of the major reasons for embarking on Students First. So I believe that while there are some increases in cost this year, as Professor Booth has pointed out, those are increases that are in line with board stated priorities around enrollment management, advisement, and ultimately Students First. We also, there are some OE costs, some non-personnel expenses related that are similar. We are investing in some technology to support the guided pathways and advisement function. We're investing some new money in making adaptations to our current student data system banner to function in as a single college. Those efforts will take several years to complete, so we need to begin now in order to have those be available to us when we are a single accredited institution in 2023.
Okay. Other members of the board have questions or comments?
Well, let me just make one last comment. Thank you, Ben Barnes, for those additional details. When I look at page 117 of the agenda package, it's page 119 in PDF, and compare the budget for the system office and central CSCC administration, it is actually larger than that of 9 of the 12 community colleges. I find that a remarkable fact. It has increased every year since 2017 when Students First was announced, and seems to be an unlikely, or seems to be the trend is clearly one of increased costs. Yet Students First, when it was first proposed, was to decrease costs. The argument being that there was financial precarity of the various community colleges, and that in order to save them, Students First would have to be instituted. That was the fiscal argument, which was, I think, predominant in 2017. But what we see now is that the growth of the costs actually makes now that there are not 12 community colleges, but in effect 13. And I find that a remarkable fact, worthy of note, and that's why I've intervened on these 2 occasions.
Thank you, Dr. Blitz. Anyone else wish to comment or respond?
Matt, it's Merle Harris.
Yes.
Okay. I just want to make one comment. It actually reinforces what Ben has already said, but I just want to make it clear from my vantage point that we need to be very cautious about any new hiring we do over the summer for any position until we get, to the October report and we actually know where we are. Because if we're not going to be able to start some programs, we need to be sure that we don't have staff hired for them.
Okay.
This is Colina. So in addition to that, I know that there are certain colleges that have very specific requests, especially relating to the COVID crisis, for urgent needs like counselors and so on. And while I know that we're hiring from a sort of for guided pathways in terms of advisors, that's very sort of directed by the sort of the long-term goal directed by the system office. But I do think that we should prioritize the specific needs that colleges are expressing at this moment, and universities. They're hit particularly hard at this moment to directly sort of intervene at a difficult time like this.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Okay. I think we have to take to heart that this is a point in time proposal, and every business, institution, organization right now is waiting with bated breath to see how long this COVID situation will persist, and how long a recovery, when it begins, might take. And I think there are a lot of reasons to feel that outlook is extremely worrisome. So we're going to need to hang on here, but I suspect we're going to find that we are, we're in a really difficult spot here for our institutions, and that we'll have more difficult choices to make in the future. And I would also just say that, I work for an organization where, the first thing to come off the table in March was wage increases. And in many cases, there were voluntary wage reductions or involuntary wage reductions. And the inexorable drumbeat of wage increases, over which this board has very little to say, if anything, also continues to be a very, very serious part of the structural deficit that is only being compounded now. And this is just not going to be easy. I know the governor has taken on that question, and it doesn't appear that there'll be any discussion about that continuing, though I am not close to that. I'm just commenting on what I've seen. At the same time as we've tried to maintain tuition at an affordable price. You know, it's a very difficult box here. Would Regent Balducci, as committee chair, is there anything else you think we ought to know or ought to add to our thinking before we call a vote on this with you and the team coming back in October with an update?
I think I've pretty much said it all, Mr. Chairman. It's very difficult. And as I said, if you read the resolution, it's probably the most difficult I've ever read. There's so much up in the air and what's before us and with the team that's working to come up with these numbers to make them work so that we're viable is going to be difficult even in September, because as they come in, of course, the October meeting will be on us ASAP. And hopefully we have as close to the correct numbers as we can get to make this functional and operational, and so that our colleges and universities can move forward in a positive fashion for what we all care about, and that's the students.
Right. And you've advised us of the ultimate conundrum of a great demand for seats in community colleges with very high unemployment, conflicting with the reduction in capacity because of COVID safety and management.
Correct.
So those are going to be challenging to manage as well. Okay, thank you. I believe you have a motion and a second. And I'll call the vote on this item now. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposing or abstaining? Okay, so it is approved. You have another item, Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Chairman, excuse me, I just heard you say the motion's approved, and I started to say, and that concludes my report for this month, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. All right, thank you. All right. We do not have an HR admin report today. I don't have anything to report from the executive committee, but I would like to request a motion to go into an executive session for discussion concerning pending litigation and number two, the evaluation of performance of a public officer or employee. May I have a second?
Second. Please, right.
Great, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Great. I think it's safe to say that we're approving the motion for executive session. I'd like to, for the record, state that we do not vote in executive session, and we won't. We'd like to ask Dr. Pritchard, Andy Kripp, Ernestine Weaver to join us for the executive session. And we do not expect to take any actions when we return to open session. So for those of you who don't want to wait for us to come back and say we didn't take any action, we wish you a great day, and thank you for your time and your interest in your efforts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All regents have been resent the WebEx information for the executive session meeting.
All right, so we leave this meeting and we're logging in separately for that.
Correct, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
Am I in the right place?
Hi, folks.
Hi.
I'm now the presenter. I don't know how that happened. It's just the three of us now.
It is. I hope they come back soon.
I think it's time to give up here because we've been abandoned. I don't know if this is being recorded or not. It may. It looks like it's still being recorded.
It is. Yeah.
Recording in progress. So
They have to come back to adjourn the meeting, do they not?
I think that's what happened.
Mm-hmm.
Lois, you're now the host.
Yeah. I don't know how that happened. I'm trying to turn off the recording, but I can't.
I might text Erin and just confirm that they are coming back to
Yeah, I want to go and have lunch, and the three of us should have a chat
Yes.
later on.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll send around the notice maybe for a quick Zoom, maybe
Okay.
around 3 o'clock. You folks ready?
Sounds good. Sounds good.
That sounds
3
good.
o'clock. Okay.
I'm actually gonna hang out just in case they come back
All right.
because
Send me
just because I want to get something on the record, but that's fine. And let me know if there's anything.
send me an instant message, and I'll keep my instant messages on, and I'll go.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm gonna, yeah, maybe
I'm
I'll
about
just
to
say
get
that
into big
since I'm
trouble
not
for
the
lunch.
host.
Say again.
Yeah, I may stay on net too because I'm the host now.
All right. Well,
Okay.
I'm not leaving either, but like by tomorrow, I think we'll have to give up.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably.
They'll find our sort of rigid bodies and rigor mortis, set in after about a year. They really had high hopes. This is all being recorded, so I'm obviously just being facetious. I certainly would look forward to the continuation of the meeting, and I will actually propose that we have a meeting in July to discuss one, further response to the pandemic at the various institutions, and two, the NESHE response to the Board of Regents response on students first. So it seems to me there should be a meeting in July. So I'd like to be on the record for that.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me know if and when they come back, and Kalina, just send me an IM on that.
Sure. Yeah. I'm on my phone, so I can just wander around with it connected. So I'll do that. Okay. Bye.
Bye.
You there? Anybody there? Mike, you there? Okay. So just letting you all know that they will not be returning.
Oh, okay.
Even though it's a, item 14 was returned to open session, right? And then adjournment. I guess they adjourned during the executive session, so they're not coming back.
Oh, I thought there's nothing to vote on then? Is that why?
I guess, yeah, I guess so. That's too bad.
Can
Yeah.
they
Because
do,
then I had
can
things
they
to
literally do that?
address. It doesn't seem right to me because it's listed. I know that he said that they, there wasn't going to be anything happening afterwards. But there was a return to open session promise, and that was the reason I didn't interrupt anything else.
Right. No, you
Yeah.
did your best there, but the minds are kind of made up.
Yeah, well, it is striking that the one time they dictated curriculum, it was diversity that they dictated. I mean, it's not good considering the commitments we've made to students. So,
Yeah.
well, maybe I'll write something up.
Hello,
and send
this
it.
is Erin Fitzgerald. I do apologize. The chairman, when he moved the board meeting into executive session, he noted that there would be no action when they returned, when they came out of executive session. They were on a separate call. There were no plans to join back into this call, and it should have ended at that time. So I do apologize that you were waiting. Lois, can you turn me over as host? I am going to end this call.
All right, and goodbye, all.
All right.
Thank you.
Take care.
Again, apologize.
Thanks for letting us know. Bye-bye.
Lois, if you're able to turn me over as, designate me as host, I'll end the meeting. Thank you.
Oh, I thought I had done that. Hold on. I can end it. I thought I had done the whole thing, but it's
That's
like,
right.
it's not letting me.
You just right click on my name. No. Okay, thank you. I apologize for any confusion there.
Thanks, Erin.
Thank you.